2023 is the best time to play Monster Hunter World, and here's why. This game was released for the PC port back in August of 2018 to some very mixed reviews. Many of them pointing out how the PC port was a horrendous port that had so many issues, from the connection issues to graphical issues to even performance issues. And as someone who played back when the game first came out, I can confirm that these were huge problems at launch. But the developers were committed to fixing the PC port, so they put their heads down and went to work. And year after year went by with the developers releasing small fixes here and there. They even released a spiritual sequel to World with Monster Hunter Rise, but unfortunately, in my opinion, it just doesn't hit the same as World did, and I think a lot of people feel the same way because many people are coming back to Monster Hunter World. So many in fact that Monster Hunter World now has over double the concurrent player base than Rise does, with over 14,000 players currently playing compared to Rise's 7,000. And it seems like the disparity between these two games is only growing bigger and bigger by the day. But why are so many people coming back to this 5-year-old game that hasn't gotten a content update since 2020? Why aren't there more people playing the more recent sequel that technically improved the gameplay foundation that World set up? And why is this giant walking pickle so angry all the time? All of these questions here will give you the reason as to why you should try out Monster Hunter World in 2023. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit rusty at this game. Even though I have over 200 hours in this game, the last time I played it was back in 2020, like 2 weeks after Iceborne dropped. So it's been a little over 3 years since I've touched Monster Hunter World, alright? I'm still pretty much a noob when it comes to this game, and my gameplay is going to reflect that. Trust me, you aren't going to get gameplay on the same level as a Japanese speedrun on this channel. Probably the opposite, that's for sure. My knowledge of this game pretty much stops at the base Iceborne expansion, so I don't know any of these monsters that they've released since then. But I digress. Now, why are so many players all of a sudden coming back to Monster Hunter World instead of playing Monster Hunter Rise? Well, for one, the game is currently half off on Steam and is going for $15 during the Capcom Halloween sale. So that's one reason. But the bigger reason why people are playing it is because World just feels more like a complete video game. Now, I'm not saying Rise is a bad game because it's far from it. But the difference was that Rise was just missing that element of a living, breathing world that World had. That sense of immersion and fascination with the landscapes, the monsters, and the wildlife is just not present in Rise. And that's because Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise fundamentally focus on catering to two very different audiences within the Monster Hunter fanbase. You see, Rise really focuses more on catering towards the fans who just wanted the Monster Hunter gameplay without all the other fluff like investigating or tracking or even story setup. You just load into the map, run straight to the monster, kill it, then do it all over again. There's not much more to Rise's gameplay loop, and for some people that's totally fine because to those people, the gameplay is the only thing that really matters. And as long as that's good, the game is good. But the problem with this approach is that it's missing the world building, their immersion, and the lore that the Monster Hunter games have. Now obviously not everyone cares about that stuff and they just play Monster Hunter to kill big monsters. And because Rise pretty much solely focuses on this aspect, it's a lot more arcadey in nature, which makes the game a lot less appealing to a brand new or casual player, leading to a much shorter shelf life. Whereas Monster Hunter World has that immersion factor that was sorely lacking in Rise. And while Rise focused more on the players that prefer a better gameplay experience, Monster Hunter World focuses more on creating a more believable universe that players can immerse themselves in. And that's very apparent with how both of these games tackle level design. In World, the developers made each of the areas so insanely detailed with their own unique environments, terrain, and endemic life that makes each of these places so memorable. If you look at the map design between these two games, it's a clear night and day difference with how much detail was put into them. In Rise, every map is pretty much made up of a bunch of huge flat open areas where there's very little verticality and no environmental hazards that you have to be mindful of. It's just you squaring up with the monster on an even playing field. That's it. There's no extra BS that you gotta do, like tracking down a monster or investigating their tracks or smelling their poop. And while this does make the gameplay much more streamlined and less tedious for some people, it loses a lot of personality that I felt like the environments brought, and for me, it made the game feel a bit flat. However, in World, every map is incredibly dense with unique environmental terrain, endemic life, and a bunch of foliage that adds so much life to the world. Not only do you have to worry about what kind of monster you're fighting, but you also have to take into account where you're fighting them because the environment can be just as dangerous as the monster itself. For example, in the icy snow map, you have to make sure that you always have a hot drink running or else your stamina drains a lot faster. There's also some areas of the map that have unstable ground that can massively hinder you should you ever fight a monster there. Or the volcano map where you have to have a cool drink running at all times or your health will slowly drain. And you have to also be cognizant of where you're standing because there's a bunch of spots on the map where there's burning hot magma and standing in it will also burn your health. There are so many more examples I could use, but you get the point. In Monster Hunter World, it's not just the monsters that you have to be aware of, but also the environment as well. And the best part about them is that you can use your surroundings to your own advantage because they are just as dangerous to the monsters as they are to you. For example, in some of the cave areas, you can drop giant stalagmites on the monster's head that will deal a bunch of damage to them and knock them on their side, opening them up for you and your teammates to deal massive damage to them. Or in this one area on the forest map where you can cause a massive waterfall washing you and the monster away and again incapacitating them, allowing you and your team to beat them up during that time. And there are so many more examples of environmental hazards that you can use to your own advantage, but I think you guys are putting up what I'm putting down by now. The plethora of dangerous environments adds a crucial third layer of complexity that rewards the player for having the knowledge of their surroundings and using it to their advantage. Not only that, but I feel like it also adds a bit of volatility to each of the hunts because there are so many variables that could go wrong that make each of the hunts in World feel chaotic. And that element is something that I felt Rise was really missing. While many people may find it annoying that something like a second monster coming out of nowhere to mess up your hunt, or accidentally getting caught in a landslide that the monsters created and getting sent to the Shadow Realm, which I got caught in more times than I like to admit, but for me, I found a certain charm to all the chaos that just wasn't really present in Monster Hunter Rise, and I feel like that's one of the reasons why so many people return to Monster Hunter World. Another reason why 2023 is such a great time to get into Monster Hunter World is because it has a much better new player experience. Once you boot up Monster Hunter World for the first time, you're introduced to this beautiful uncharted island of Astera where you can explore and discover a plethora of brand new wildlife that may or may not want to kill you. It also does help that since Monster Hunter World was meant to be played on PC, the graphics and textures are incredibly detailed, making this world and the monsters look absolutely gorgeous. And I think this game was the first Monster Hunter that Capcom ported over to the PC, bringing it to a completely brand new audience. And since this game was intended for a brand new audience, you're given a proper introduction to the Monster Hunter lore and universe. You're introduced to all the important characters to the story, and each of the monsters are given their own unique intros that really highlight how terrifying they are. I know no one really cares about the story or the characters, especially the handler. But the story was never really the focus of these games, and it's more so just to provide context for why you're hunting these monsters. It's not much, but I feel like it really helps immerse you into this world, turning it from a nice little game you can pick up and play for a couple of hours to an experience that you always keep coming back to time and time again. Not only that, but the gameplay is also a lot more beginner friendly. That's not to say the gameplay and mechanics are simple, because they're not. If you watch gameplay from a professional speedrunner and a complete newbie, they'll be in completely different universes because there's such a high skill ceiling in this game. There's also a low skill floor, meaning that a brand new player can easily learn the ropes and still do decently well without much knowledge because Monster Hunter's combat is easy to learn but hard to master. And the skill ceiling is further pushed up in Rise with the addition of wire bugs and secondary skill sets, making that game a Monster Hunter veteran's dream. But it does come at the cost of making the fights feel a little more faster paced because the wire bugs let you zip around the map like Spider-Man. While in World, it feels a bit more on the slower and methodical side because your movement options are a lot more limited. So preparation and knowledge of the fights are a lot more important in this game. For example, you gotta make sure you've got your potions in case you take damage, both normal and mega. You also need to make sure your weapon is sharpened. Make sure you have an antidote in case you get poisoned. And this is all preparation you have to do before the hunt actually starts. You still have to execute the fights out relatively well for the most part if you want to succeed. The amount of preparation that you can do in World really gives you that feeling of a hunter preparing to hunt some really big game. And that's what I think is one of the coolest parts of Monster Hunter World. Now, some people might find that pretty annoying and tedious, so Rise streamlined that process by removing a lot of the fluff there. But in my opinion, that's what gives Monster Hunter World its unique flavor, and that's what makes it the most definitive Monster Hunter experience you can get on PC. Overall though, Monster Hunter World is one of the best games that Capcom have ever released. And even though it came out 5 years ago, it still stands toe to toe with the modern AAA titles that released this year. The graphics are still just as beautiful, the immersion factor that this game has is extremely good, and the easy to learn but hard to master gameplay loop in this game is so addicting. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down below and make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content in the future. See ya.